Now it's time for our viewer outrage segment. As attorneys general across the country call for a nationwide moratorium on foreclosures, we're asking if that would do more harm than good. Here's what you said. Gary, if banks were getting paid on the mortgages, the foreclosures wouldn't be happening. Dumb government move. Foreclose them already. Joining us now, Shari Olefson, real estate attorney and partner, Fowler White Boggs, and Steve Horne, Wingspan Portfolio Advisors founder and president. Steve Horne, let me talk to you. How badly would this affect the economy and the so-called housing recovery if we did have a nationwide foreclosure moratorium?
Well, I think it'd be quite substantial in terms of the effect, but it's something that I see it's hard for the larger institutions to avoid. Essentially, you have a situation here where the fundamental integrity of the process is at question, and whether they're even able to deliver title to these houses.
Shari, let's go to you on this. It seems that in some ways that by, if we were to have a nationwide moratorium, we might actually just be delaying the inevitable.
Completely, Trish. And you know what? All foreclosures is much too big of a bucket here. I mean, I use the analogy of the problem that Toyota had with their brake systems. We didn't shut down all car manufacturers. There are plenty of foreclosure firms. There are plenty of banks out there that are doing these foreclosures the right way. And frankly, there are plenty of borrowers who don't want their foreclosures to stop. They want to get this behind them and they want to be able to move over. And like we said before, to some extent, this is the inevitable. There's so much more damage that can be caused. And you know what? We already have systems in place, Trish, to fix this. I mean, who's not going to be concerned with an attorney general investigation? I mean, what bank is are we not getting the attention of at this point? Even the foreclosure processes allow for borrowers to interplead these kind of issues in the term of their case, or to go back and have a judgment vacated if they feel that their property was wrongly taken from them. So we already have the systems in place to deal with this.
But Steve Horne, I am going to disagree a little bit with my friend Shari Olefson. The so-called systems in place, Steve, it all looks like it broke down. We're talking legal systems here. So banks, legal departments, the robo-signers, the title insurance companies. It looks like the whole housing, contract, and property rights system has broken down. Now, I want to get your take on how bad this is. To me, it's chaos and implosion.
I would have to agree with that. It's a testament to the fact that the servicers are so overwhelmed with the volume going through the system that they've had to take certain shortcuts just to try and stay on top of the wave. But unfortunately, as you say, it's thrown the entire legality of the process into question.
I mean, it's the legal. It's the legal part that bothers me. It's the legal part that bothers me. You know, we have this great legal tradition, Shari, in the United States. We have private property law, and that seems to have all broken down in this situation.
Larry, you know what? It's reprehensible that lawyers who are officers of the court are not following court procedure and state law. And we don't need to say what kind of message this is sending to the American public about our court system. It's horrific, especially when homes are being lost as a result. But the system broke down long before this. The system never kept up with the mortgage industry was the problem. I mean, we don't have a foreclosure system that can deal with securitization. We tried to do it with the MERS registration system. It didn't work. Judges are setting that aside. And frankly, you know, we have different judicial processes for foreclosure in all of our states. So if government wants to get involved, rather than a foreclosure moratorium now, we should look at a longer-term solution of fixing the system so that it's more in line with modern mortgage securitization.
Hey, Shari,
and maybe even the
moratorium is painful for the banks, right? I mean, it's not necessarily helping them either. So why are they doing it?
Well, my guess would be they're doing it to avoid exactly what we're talking about, which would be a government-imposed moratorium.
And lawsuits.
Obviously, they're doing it because the risks and lawsuits. Obviously, the risks of not doing it are bigger than the risks of doing it, and we know that the risks of doing it and the costs are huge. So they must know that the cost of not doing it would be way bigger.
I mean, Steve Horne, if Bank of America and the other largest lenders close it down, they close it down. I mean, isn't that the practical impact of this?
Well, what we're looking at here is potentially the equivalent of a military stand-down. If they've had several accidents in a short period of time, it's a moment to take a look at the entire process and make sure, as Shari was saying, what is wrong, what hasn't worked, what is wrong with the system that is unable to keep up with the demands brought on by the current economy.
Doesn't it worry you, though, Steve, if you get the government in there and they say, okay, we're going to put this moratorium on all of these foreclosures, might then they be looking at all of these, and then you're really going to be filled up with all this red tape as the government gets itself involved?
Well, the problem is I think this is a symptom of not having really dealt with the fundamental issues up to this point. And because you have so many third parties involved, purchasers of these REO assets, the mortgage insurance companies that have paid claims on these foreclosures, second mortgages that have been purportedly wiped out by the first lien foreclosing, and now all of that is in doubt and all of that is up for question. It's a very serious
you know what,
issue.
For all practical purposes, the system is shut down. The title underwriters are not insuring title. There's no new lenders who will make loans. So from a practical standpoint, it's shut down.
Well,
and I think we need to realize...
That was my thought, Shari, that when you see these big banks, look, the Bank of America is the biggest lender, okay? When you see this, the government can do what the government thinks it's going to do, but the government cannot act quickly. The banks have made a decision, and it's a shutdown decision. So I guess my final question to you is, how damaging will this be to housing recovery? There has been some impact on the housing stocks in the last week as this became a front-page story. How damaging, Shari?
Well, you know, it's interesting because obviously this is going to drag the foreclosure crisis on even longer. And the job loss, Larry, already there are thousands of jobs being lost as these foreclosure mills lay off people. I mean, the title industry, the real estate industry, the mortgage industry, in terms of getting these defaulted assets through the system, had been one of the biggest employers. And a lot of people are going to be losing jobs. Interestingly, though, is that those homes that are not in foreclosure may actually end up being worth more because they're not going to have to compete on the market now with these distressed assets.
All right. Steve, thank you very much. Shari, thank you very much. This is a tricky question.
A mess. All right, when we come back.